I think all limitations are necessary in filmmaking. There's kind of the magic triangle, I call it, which is how much creativity you have, how much money you have, and then time. And you kind of, within those boundaries, try to make choices so that you're pushing out on the edges of that triangle, but never breaking it. Requiem for a Dream.
I always thought you were the most beautiful girl I ever seen.
Really?
Ever since I first saw you.
That's nice, Harry.
What made me want to make Requiem for a Dream was Hubert Selby Jr.'s book. I remember reading the book, and from opening story, I could see it. And that's what was amazing about Selby's writing, is it's so visual. Like, he's able to take such deep internal feelings and turn them into like scenes that you can actually shoot. It's just very cinematic writing. And Requiem is very much written like a movie. I mean, it's a very dark, messed up movie, but it has really good structure.
So I got your brand new TV set. It's gonna be delivered in a couple of days. It's from Macy's.
Oh!
Yeah.
Your father'd be so happy if he could see what you're doing for your mother. See that, Seymour? You see how good your son is? He knows what it's like for his mother living all alone.
There's so many with Ellen Burstyn. I had just never been around a actor like that before. I was new in my career. She was so experienced and such a master. She was constantly making choices that were unexpected and insightful and so deeply and human felt. She'd go into this like kind of trance state right before she would go. It was just like deep focus, and then suddenly something would be unleashed, and it was amazing to sit there and receive it. Caught Stealing.
I made a save tonight. OD.
That's incredible.
I've got push-shift adrenaline. I'm not thinking clearly. Let's go back to your place and you can take advantage of my poor judgment.
I depend on your poor judgment.
It starts with research. Luckily, Mark Freeberg, my production designer, was also here in New York in the 90s, as was probably most of his crew. So it was, I think, fun for us to deep dive and remember and look at old photographs and probably video that was shot on VHS. Every film, we try to do something different. We come up with a film grammar, a different approach. And that all has to do with what the story's about. You kind of assemble a team, you start working on it, you think about it, and you just try to do the best you can with all the limited amount of time you have. It's like, okay, how are we gonna make this great? And then when you're there, you just try to capture as much of that universe as you can. You know, one of the best reference points for what Coney Island was like in the late 90s was footage from Requiem for a Dream. We have footage from on top of Trump Tower building looking out over the whole Coney Island, so you could sort of see what was around back then. You know, so I think it starts with just like research, and you start to, and memories, and everyone had a lot of memories about that time. I grew up near Coney Island, and Coney Island is this kind of mystical place in a lot of ways. It's funny, most people think when all the people on the boats first came to America back in the 1890s, 1900, that the first light they saw was the Statue of Liberty. But in reality, it was like the 10,000 lights of Lunaland. It had more light bulbs than anywhere on the planet at one point, which you could imagine that people coming from a place where electricity was extremely rare, suddenly to see like a horizon lit up. But growing up there in the 70s, 80s, 90s, it was dying, and it was rotting, and it was rusting, and it was falling apart, and there were lots of empty lots, but still the kind of storied history was just sizzling out of the ground, so that every time I went, I was inspired to sort of capture it in different ways. So I was always trying to capture it. And then when I started making feature films, I knew I wanted to come back to it. It's interesting, Pi, which was released in 1998, there's a scene where Max goes back to Coney Island, and I realized after the fact, after I made the movie, that in Caught Stealing, which is set in 1998, that not just going back physically to the same place, but emotionally where Hank Thompson, Austin Butler's character, is He's emotionally in the same place as where Max is, and the Coney Island serves the same type of turning point for the movies.
Welcome to Narnia. Supposed to do the big split day I left.
How much is there?
Wee bit over 4 million.
Okay, all right, okay. So we call Rome.
It's more complicated than that.
I want to go home. I want to see my mom.
Mom. Phone.
You want to phone your mum?
Yeah.
Just don't use up my minutes.
I think there was like a certain type of lawlessness and grit that to the streets, which the East Village still has for sure. I think it was like important to bring that kind of I don't know, that punk smell up from the sewers. The Wrestler.
You realize what's coming up?
Huh?
April 6th. 20th anniversary of you and I told at the God.
Hey. Long time ago.
Time fucking flies, right? And here's what I'm thinking. 2 words. Rematch.
I have a couple of questions about Mickey Rourke, but with Randy specifically, is he gets to this point where he has 2 options. He can chase the dream that he had lost.
Or get the girl.
Get the girl and his daughter. What is it about self-destructive characters?
It was something I noticed when I did the research. I knew there was a film set in the wrestling world that hadn't been told yet because no wrestling film had really been made. But there'd been so many boxing movies. And I was like, why is it? And I think it's because people looked at wrestling as a joke. So I started to do research. And when I started to meet some of these older wrestlers, guys that I was a huge fan of when I was 13, and they were just all beaten up and just their lives had been just taking tough turns. First, I realized that it wasn't just all fake, meaning, of course, the plotting might be fake, but the physical violence was real. I was really curious about what drove these guys, why they were on the road, late 50s, 60s, 70s. What was it? Clearly, there's other ways to make money. And I started to see that throughout. Like, I meet young people that were getting into it. They could see where their future was headed. Some people do certain sports, even though they know that it's going to mess them up, but there's like great financial rewards or fame and stuff. It was very tricky to understand it. And so it was really, I was trying to explore that when I was looking into Randy the Ram.
Who's next?
Me.
What you having? Good looking?
Half-pound egg salad.
Half a pound egg salad coming up. Here we go.
Fresh?
Fresh?
Yeah.
Fresh as monkey's breath, brother. Oh, yeah. This is the good stuff. Coming up. Down and out. Come on.
I think he was excited, Mickey, by it. I think he was reluctant because he realized that he was going to have to hold the entire film. And it had been a very long time since he was the lead of a movie. And of course, he had memories of how hard that was. And well, he was reluctant a little bit because he was a boxer and he was a little bit of a snob towards wrestlers, which is often the case because boxers are really getting in there and trying to knock each other out. And wrestlers aren't, that's not the same motivation. But he slowly learned a lot of respect for wrestlers as he got to meet a bunch of them and learn about the art. It wasn't that much of a battle. The big battle was trying to get the money to make the movie with Mickey. No one in the world believed in him. No one. And it almost didn't come to pass. I knew the audience would be really curious to see what Mickey looks like. People hadn't seen him that much. Of course, there was a lot of gossip about what he looked like. So I thought like hiding that for a while, it would make the audience lean in. But Mickey's just a brilliant actor. But a brilliant director that worked with him was actually my mentor. So Stuart Rosenberg, who was my teacher, directed Mickey in Pope of Greenwich Village. And he told a story about Mickey doing this scene with his back and how much an actor, a great actor, can perform with his back. So that was floating in my head when I started shooting with Mickey. And I think it was a game time decision when we were shooting the opening of the film where I was like, you know what, let's do something different here. Let's take a while to introduce him to the audience. Let's find the right moment. And I realized the right moment was when he was alone in his van and there was nowhere else to hide and just a flashlight to light him, because it just felt like a great way to kind of open and reveal his humanity. The Whale.
I want you to do some writing just for me.
I hate writing essays.
Just think about the poem for a while. or write something. Be honest. Tell me what you really think.
You want me to write what I really think?
I think the reason we were interested in Brendan Fraser was because my main collaborator, my main producer, Ari Handel, was a huge fan. In college, he had made a bet with our other roommate that Brendan Fraser would win an Oscar in the next 25 years over a case of beer. And we made it happen in 24 years.
Could you? I haven't been to the bathroom all day. I'm ready to explode.
You know, I had only seen Charlie on paper. I saw a play version of it early when I first saw the play. It was really Brendan's role. I didn't really see it till he was in makeup and he was in front of me and he started to breathe life into it. And then it just became a dance after that. Mother.
And that? What is that?
Careful. This is very, very delicate.
It was a gift. A very special gift. Is it from you?
No.
I would love to know how you approach directing an actor when they're playing an allegory.
It's a good question. I think it's all grounded. I think the allegory stuff is there, but you have real human relationships. You know, the setup of that world is fine. It's a loving couple, newlywed couple living in a home in the middle of nowhere, and she's building the house and has writer's block, and you just treat it like it's reality.
I can't believe you did all this work yourself.
Why not?
It's a lot.
Well, we spend all our time here. I want to make a paradise.
I think really we were pretty traditional to the stories in both the Old and the New Testament. That's all I needed. I had the idea for the story, and the Bible is what gave me structure. Black Swan. When I met Natalie to first talk about Black Swan, it was more like I knew I wanted to do something in the ballet world because my sister had been a ballerina in a serious way in my youth, and I knew nothing about ballet, and I knew there was a world there to discover. When you make a movie, you kind of get a doctorate in the subject matter you're covering, so I knew this was a good way to sort of kind of figure it out. And then when I talked to Natalie, we had some mutual friends. I found out she had taken ballet and had been serious about it as a young girl. And so that was intriguing because there was a connection. So I said, hey, would you want to do something in that world? And she was super excited. So we did a couple of meetings. We went to see some rehearsals of some of the big ballet companies, but there really wasn't a script ready. And then it took the following, you say 2000, so it probably took 10 years to get a script together, or 8 years to get a script together that made sense, which is a very, very long story. And I think as it evolved, Natalie was always in our head to play the lead. It was literally shot in a nightclub on a church in Manhattan with strobes and with the lighting, with the actors and with some extras. That was all done by this great artist named Ray Lewis, who was a friend of ours and was kind of a guy who worked in visual effects back then. And he went through that frame by frame and manipulated shots in lots of different ways. So it's an entire approach to a movie is like camera, sound, everything's working together to like make the audience kind of vibe with the character. You know, it's very subjective filmmaking. It would be done totally different in today's world, but that was kind of handmade. Hi. I was a freshman in school getting B minuses on my papers. My roommate in college was an animator and was just basically making these incredible things. And I was just fascinated by it. And so I took a drawing class. It was an amazing teacher, Will Ryman, and he kind of changed the way I could look at the world and think about representing it on paper. And that kind of sent me down the path of thinking about having a career in the kind of arts.
He stopped caring. How could he stop when he was so close to seeing pie for what it really is? How could you stop believing that there is a pattern?
I guess Pie started with like being in New York and trying to make a feature and thinking about how to control the canvas. And the first thing I thought about is like, okay, let's find a actor that I could collaborate with. And that became Sean Gillette, who was a friend from college. And I was always interested in a character. For some reason, I thought calculus because I had no idea what it was. But like someone who was brilliant in mathematics in a way, I thought that was interesting. There was also like a famous story about these Russian guys who had built a supercomputer in their apartment on the Upper West Side to calculate pi. And then I had a teacher in high school that was like a great teacher, and he did a class on the mystical elements of math. It was an elective, and for some reason I took it. And there was just all these interesting, like crazy Pythagorean stories about, I thought there was something there. There was like taking mysticism with math, hard math, and sort of finding a blend. So those all different elements came together and eventually created Pi. Noah.
Men are going to be punished for what they've done to this world. There will be destruction. There will be tragedy. But our family has been chosen for a great task. We've been chosen to save the innocent.
The innocent?
The animals.
Why are they innocent? Because they still live as they did in the garden.
Those first few chapters of Genesis, all the way through the Tower of Babel, are like extremely abstract. And I think the normal laws of this universe were very different at that time. That's even in the Bible. The length of time people lived, and also there's just very little description about what's going on. We wanted to be incredibly truthful to gospel, meaning we didn't want to contradict anything, but we wanted to kind of recognize that before the flood, it was a very different planet. You know, when they describe the Nephilim, it's about these fallen angels that actually have sex with women and then they have an offspring. And so we were making a PG-13 film, and that seemed like very hard to approach. So we went for a metaphor, which was they were still fallen angels, but they blended with the earth, and we used the earth. And the offspring are these creatures that come out of a blend of the earth and of the spirituality. And that's how we sort of kind of created these kind of creatures. They have the spirit of the angel stuck inside of them, but they are crusted with the kind of weights and the chains of earth because they are fallen angels. So we kind of tried to lean into the metaphor because it's so abstract, the ideas, and how do you kind of visualize it and put it on film was the question. The Fountain. When you turn 30, it's an interesting moment because you never think you're going to get old, and then suddenly you're 30. And that's like the first number they stick on you that you go, oh shit, it's happening. Because, you know, your 20s, you're just in your 20s, you're doing fine. And then suddenly like, wow. And at the same time, I start to see people dying around me. So you start to like really kind of wake up to those types of things. And then I've thought that, you know, A Search for the Fountain of Youth is like totally a big commercial idea. So I started to like think about how do we make something interesting. It just became became a poem I had to tell. And once I get my teeth stuck on something, I sort of have to keep biting. You know, I don't know if it really falls into sci-fi. It's weird. There are science fiction elements. You know, I've heard sci-fi romance, which I never thought I would be responsible for a romance movie. It's definitely not a disturbing one, yet they still say I make disturbing movies for some reason.